Hello everyone, I am back with my full review of the Freeplay CM3. And ooh, it's looking very nice, isn't it? Way better than the last one I did. This one I actually only had it on there for maybe a couple days before I decided to try the second attempt. And of course, as you can see, the second attempt went a lot smoother. I learned a lot of lessons from this first one. Like I said, if you want to do this, if you want to make one of these, I highly recommend that you get a cheapo case that you could throw away. These things are cheap anyhow. They're like 10 bucks all day on eBay. So get a cheap one that you can make all your mistakes on and then learn from those and then make a really good one. Look at this. It came out much better. Look at those holes. Look at the one up here. That's so disgusting. Oh my god. Yeah, and look at the SD card slots. Oh man. Yeah, so this one it was just not going to do. So I think it was maybe a day or two before I left to PAX South. I made my second attempt. I did it all in one night, and it came out looking great. And so, like I said, I did learn a lot. I want to share those little secrets, those little tips that I learned. And that way it can maybe help you out as well and give you a little bit more insight into this device. Let me do that first, and then I'll give you my impressions on how this thing performs. Alright, now as you can see, this device is already assembled, it's completed, it's playable, but there are some nagging little issues that I need to resolve. It is a fiddly little device, especially for first timers like me, so I want to try to resolve those issues in this video, and that'll help you see how to get this thing running to its full potential. The first issue is that there seems to be a little bit of screen bending that's happening. When you push on the device right here by the D-pad, and even while you're using the D-pad, you start to see this little ripple effect that's happening on the screen. What you're seeing is that there's some pressure that's being applied to the LCD, and that's causing it to do that. That's not good news because too much pressure will make the LCD crack. So we gotta resolve that, figure out what's happening there. The next issue is that the Microusb port, which is used for charging, is too small. I guess I didn't cut enough plastic, but it just needs to be enlarged. Now it will still charge, I could still get a micro USB connection in there, but again, it's just not enough room, it's barely hanging on by a hair. And the last issue I have is a sticky left shoulder button. Something is catching it, I don't know what, but it just doesn't return the same way that the right shoulder button does. It's not as bouncy. And sometimes it'll just get stuck in place, so I need to resolve that. Now starting with the screen bending issue, I think it might be something with the inner bezel, which is on the inside of the case. I did a really poor job smoothing that out, but I think if I go in and redo it, then that might resolve that issue. So to fix that, I'm going to use one of these metal files and then scrape away plastic. And after a while, that's looking good, so let's move on to the micro USB port. Now this is where I could give the most helpful tips, or should I say you guys can give the most helpful tips. Getting all the plastic cut correctly is obviously the most difficult part of this build. And as you guys know, I really messed up that first build. But thankfully, you guys provided some good tips in the comments. You guys told me that I shouldn't use a Dremel by itself. Instead, most Dremel kits, including the one that I used, they come with this hose attachment, and then you put the Dremel bit on the end of that. That makes it so much easier to use precisely. You don't have this heavy power tool in your hand, and that really helped me get the cuts right the second time around, so thank you. Another important tip, do not use your Dremel bit for everything, because then your case is going to look like that. Instead, you're just going to want to take out chunks of plastic, don't take out too much, take out less than what you need, and then to finish the job, you're going to want this. This is going to become your new best friend. It's a big metal file with square ends. It looks like overkill, but no, this is just the right size. Because you're going to be shaving off a lot of plastic with it, so you want to get this in there to make your final holes, and that's where the size comes in handy. Because to make good progress, you want to use long strokes. And that's where you're going to see a lot of progress in a very short amount of time. In fact, this method is so effective, I would argue you don't even need the Dremel. Just use your long strokes and cut the holes for the case that way. I really think you'll get the same results. Then if you want to, use those smaller files to get some really professional looking edges. And the last issue is with that left shoulder button. I did not expect that the shoulder buttons would be such an issue on these builds. It really is tough because it's almost impossible to figure out where it's catching. So I used what I learned in the previous build, I sanded down those little joints on the shoulder button, and I shaved down the plastic around the button very, very slightly. I had no clue if that would fix it, but let's put it back together and see. And check this out, I'm already seeing good results. First off, you can see the little pressure point by the D-pad is not causing the LCD to bend anymore, so consider that problem solved. Next, we have the micro USB port that we enlarged, and now it has a much more comfortable fit and it's even hanging on, this is great. I also like how when it's charging there's this blue light that comes out of the cartridge port. When it's done charging it turns green. And guess what, the left shoulder button got fixed as well. It feels 1,000 times better now. Now unfortunately we did have one casualty along the way. While I was shaving down the inner bezel, I accidentally scratched the glass screen cover. And it's a deep scratch, so we can't use this anymore. So I just got another reproduction glass cover for a couple bucks, and there you go, fixed. Now before we move on, I want to point something out. In that first video, I got quite a few comments from people telling me, "Check your facts, dude, that's a Raspberry Pi Zero, not a Pi 3. And to respond to those people, I like to show you this. You can see right here that it says Raspberry Pi Compute Module 3. As I explained in the first video, this is a Raspberry Pi 3, it is not a Pi Zero. Not all Raspberry Pi 3s look like this. This one is a Pi 3, but it's in compute module form. This form factor is made specifically for devices like the CM3. It's for when you already have a custom PCB and now you want to add a Pi to it. Now as you saw, the compute module is removable, and that also got me thinking, is it possibly upgradable? I don't know, maybe if they make a Pi 4 compute module with the same connector, maybe you could just swap it in. I don't know, maybe that's possible. Alright, now let's get into the unit. Now before we get into gameplay, you should know that there's another way to get your ROMs onto this device. Of course I showed you a very simple method in the assembly video. With that method, you just load the ROMs onto a flash drive and then put it into the system. It is extremely idiot-proof, I highly recommend it. And this other method I want to tell you about is a little more complicated to set up, but you could do a lot more with it after you have it running. You do this by adding your Raspberry Pi to your Wi-Fi network, and then transferring files via FTP. I'm not going to take you through the whole process, but just search Raspberry Pi FTP setup and it should give you several guides. In order to do this, you do need a Wi-Fi dongle. It attaches to the top of the Freeplay, and at first I thought it looked kind of weird. It kind of upsets the look of this device to just have a dongle hanging off one side, but after a while I grew to like it. It sort of looks like the device has a little periscope, it's really cool. And now onto the games. I really don't have a lot of complaints here. I was able to play everything that I wanted to, and whenever there was a game that just didn't load, I would just go into the settings and then swap out the emulator app for that specific game, and then it would work. I can't think of a single game that I couldn't get to work, and adding more systems is so easy. All you do is just dump ROMs in that system's folder, and there you go. It just knows that that system is available. Lately I've been playing a lot of Sega SG-1000. But the accomplishment I'm most proud of is that I'm playing N64 on this. And it is hilarious to be playing N64 on a Game Boy Advance. But of course the controls are going to be an issue. It just doesn't have enough buttons. And there were only like a handful of N64 games that don't use the analog stick. Kirby and the Crystal Shards is one of them, and so I've been playing that a bit. So as you can see, I gave up on looking for compatibility issues because I figured I wouldn't find any. I mean hell, if it could do N64, what else do you want? I did have one annoying problem with the emulation though. There does seem to be a little bit of lag, you could barely notice it, but it is there. So I decided to load up Subterranea to do my patented lag test, and sure enough, the test shows that there is lag here. It's not a lot, in most games I played it was not noticeable. But in a game like Subterranea that requires precise control, you are going to notice it, it will affect your game. You're probably not going to want to play a super twitchy platformer on this device, but again, the lag is so minimal that for the vast majority of games, you're not even going to notice it. I have just a couple more complaints with the device itself. The LCD screen's resolution is 320 by 240, which is exactly what you want for retro games, but not what you want for modern games. So classic games look perfect, but a game like Cave Story had text which was really hard to read. The Freeplay does have HDMI out, and it looks great on a big screen, but it's in a really strange resolution that my game capture was not able to recognize. And there's one last thing that I need to complain about. It's very odd, but I don't think there's a way to check the battery level. It might be buried in a menu somewhere, but I couldn't find it. And while I was testing this, I never ran out of battery, so I don't really know what the battery life is. Some people report that it's between 5 or 6 hours, and I know that I've done better than that, so maybe it just depends on which emulator you use, I don't know. Alright, so the device isn't perfect, but do I recommend it? Yes, absolutely. I have such a sense of pride with this device, which you won't find in any other device I own. That's become a big selling point for me, and it's something I didn't realize until after I built up the device into what you see today. I only figured it out now that in that assembly video, I was going about it all wrong. I want to approach this handheld by showing you that any idiot can make this, it's not that hard, and you could do it very quickly. Turns out that's a good way to not enjoy this device. And while I did prove that an idiot could build this, the rest of my method was totally wrong. You need patience, you need to take your time, and you can learn a few skills along the way, and that's going to give you the best device, which is going to give you the most enjoyment. This handheld, unlike any other one on the market, is only as good as you are. And that first time around, I wasn't on top of my game, I was rushing, I was sloppy, and the results show that. You can totally build this thing in an hour on your first attempt, and it's probably gonna look like garbage. Or you can ignore the clock, you can take pride in your work, and you'll end up with something that looks like this. I don't even know how many hours I put into this last unit, but it doesn't matter, I'm happy with the results. I also like that I went with such a boring color choice. It makes it look factory original. It looks like the Game Boy Advance they should have sold us back then. Extra face buttons and all. It feels like I rewrote history. My Freeplay turned out so well that it gives me confidence to try out other projects. Like for instance, I know that on the Flashback 2 you can add a cartridge port to it. I have a spare one laying around, so I'd like to try that sometime. Now I'm aware of the criticisms against this device. A lot of them were about the Game Boy Advance case. You guys didn't like it that you basically have to make your own case, which I would agree is the hardest part, and they don't provide their own custom design. I have seen a few portable Pi projects that do have their own custom case, and I encourage you to go look them up because they are always garbage. Unless your name is Ben Heck. And for the people who do use good cases for their portable Pis, guess what they are? Old Game Boy shells. There's a reason for that, it's because these people know that designing a good case is harder than it looks. So why not just modify something off the shelf? And while you guys were complaining about Freeplay not providing a custom case, I can assure you, and remember I read all the comments, I know that not one person complained that the Game Boy Advance case is uncomfortable. That's silly, it's one of the most comfortable handhelds ever made. And meanwhile, when somebody designs their own custom Pi case, it usually looks like an ice cream sandwich, or they just stuff it in an Altoids tin, which I am so sure you guys would have no complaints about, because I mean, those little tins, they don't have any awkward edges to them, and they fit into your hands so well for those long gameplay sessions. Yeah, right. If I was reviewing that device, you guys would bitch into next week about how uncomfortable it looks. So considering the alternatives, I'm happy that they're using GBA shells. I think it's an advantage, and like I said before, it makes replacement parts dirt cheap. And there's another big criticism which I actually encountered while I was testing this device. I was at a local thrift store and I was able to get a PSP 3000 for $15. Now that device is about 1/10 of the price of this one, it doesn't require any physical modification, and after you soft mod it, you can play pretty much the same systems. And I am not going to argue against that, the PSP is a great alternative, so is the Xperia Play. If you would rather go that route, then do it and be happy. But that just doesn't appeal to me, and my reasoning is pretty dumb, but I'll just tell you. I love unique devices, I like collecting things that other people don't have. There's a reason why I collect Watara Supervisions, and it's obviously not for the games. It's because they provide an experience that another handheld won't give you. I don't think I'm alone in that, I think other retro gamers also collect things because of their uniqueness. And when it comes to that sort of stuff, I could think of few toys that are as neat as a Game Boy Advance stuffed with Pi. Let me put it to you this way, if the house is on fire, I'm leaving the PSP behind, but I'm taking the Freeplay CM3. So that's why I like this device. Building it is one of my proudest achievements, and maybe it's something you'd be interested in building too. So follow my recommendations, get an extra case because you're gonna screw it up the first time around, take your time, no wait, let me rephrase that, take pride in your work, and remember, long strokes. And lastly, I want to thank Ed Mandy, he's the guy who brought the Freeplay handheld project to life. I want to remind you guys this is not sponsored content. I received this handheld at a discount, but I did pay out of pocket for it. All of these opinions are my own and this video was not reviewed before publishing, and I will leave links below showing you where you can get a Freeplay handheld. Thank you for watching guys, I will see you next time.